It will record it, and I'll be able to, you'll be able to access it there from YouTube.
Great. Okay,
Yeah.
so the way I did this before, I think I subscribed to your channel, but I haven't been there in a while.
Okay.
Apologies.
Yeah, no, I haven't uploaded in ages. So.
Let's see. How would I videos?
Yeah, so when you go to my channel, you should actually see me right now on the channel.
Let me see here. When did you last? Okay, that takes me, let's see. Oh yeah, so it says live now, is that you?
Yep, that's it.
You're wearing polka dots?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Okay, great. So usually I give it a little bit of time because I never really tell people that I'm going on live, and they just see me and they come on. Hey, my son, how are you? Good to see you. Yeah, everyone's used to me appearing and then disappearing. So, yeah. So after a while, you'll see people start to come in on the group. How are you doing, my son? How are you coping with everything that's going on? Matt's son is one of my regular people that when I'm on, they're so supportive. So, yeah, so Matt's son's there right now. I hope you're doing well during the crazy pandemic stuff that's happening around the planet and stuff today. I hope you're preparing, doing all of those things. It's always good to see you when I come back on. I'm going to get into some astrology and stuff today. So I'm really excited. I'm going to give people a bit of time to come on, and then I'll introduce my guests to the audience. Okay. You're great. Global change. Yep. Yeah. And for all the people that have been preparing for this time period, I think it's kind of, it's not as scary and as fearful as I think it would be, all of these changes that are happening, because we've kind of prepared our auric fields for the things that are currently happening today. We know with the astrology and things like that we've been talking about on my channel and so many other people's channels for years, we've been speaking about this time period. So because of that, we're somewhat prepared, more than most people who had no idea these things were coming. So good to see you. So yeah, so Andre, this is how it'll work. It'll be back and forth. Paul is there. Paul Mack, how are you? Paul and I have been conversing for years through my channel and stuff like that. So if you notice Andre, you'll see Paul Mack. He's an awesome brother, great person. So good to have you here, Paul. We'll get into some topics today. I have someone on the phone that I'm speaking to right now. His name is Andre. I'm going to introduce him to you guys, and he'll share some of his insight into the things that are happening today through an astrological lens. So we'll be speaking about all of that today. Okay, Paul, how are you doing, Paul? Okay, let me see something. So if you see there, Andre, with the live feed on the right, people start writing in. Good. I'm glad that you're doing fine.
I see his number, but I don't see anything as far as names.
Oh, you don't see a chat on the right side?
Well, hold on. Maybe I can.
Okay.
Yes, I see it now.
Okay. Yeah. So it's good. You'll be able to see people, interacting when you start to speak, Paul. Some of them may even ask questions for you in regard to what it is you're speaking about, your expertise. So that'll be a nice interaction that will happen. Okay, Paul, how are you coping? Are you working? Are you or have you been home like everyone else during this whole time? There you go, this moment. I see you there. How are you been doing, Paul? I looked for you in the group the other day on Facebook, and I was like, wow, I thought about you. I was like, I wonder how Paul's doing. Not working, just at home. So I bet you that's giving you a lot of time to think. I was, Andre is on the phone. You guys will hear from him more. But Andre, I was actually thinking today, I was like, you know what, with everyone being home during the quarantine, of course, it's a very difficult thing. There's no human interaction, I feel. There's kind of a lack of natural affection because you're not even able to hug your grandmother. You know, those are horrible, horrible things. But I was like, okay, one of the pluses, though, is that people have had time to be home where they're not in the rat race and they have time to think and time to reassess their lives. And I feel like there's a level of entrepreneurship that might come out of all of this because some people have to reinvent how they make their money. And so maybe perhaps their gifts and their talents will be highlighted during this time. And maybe they'll make a business or career using their gifts. So I was like, this is a good time, I think, you know, pluses and minuses, but I think that's very positive. So
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's periods like this, whenever you see turbulent change, and especially when it almost feels forced on you, if you adapt and cooperate and go with it, many people actually will grow more than had it not happened, which is ironic, but it's true.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean you wish for it to happen, but when it happens, it can be important.
Absolutely. So true. Yeah, I think, you know, sometimes the universe forces us through certain energetic events that happen within our life. It forces us to move on to the actual reason that we're here. And so, right? Oh, good. I can hear your voice now. I couldn't hear it on my speaker. Now it's on my speaker. Kennedy, love, how are you? I miss you. Good to see you. How are you doing? I hope everything's well with you. We have to catch up. Yeah, Kennedy, you're going to be very happy because my guest, Andre, is an astrologer. And I sit at his feet because he's very, very gifted. So I know that having him on the show today, you guys are going to learn a lot. And I am also going to learn a lot. And I'm really excited to share someone with his insight to you guys, okay? So sometimes you get kind of bored hearing the same astrologer speak. So let's hear insight from someone who actually has more experience in it as well, into certain things that are happening around the world today. So I'm going to start, Andre, by introducing you right now to my audience. Thank you, Kennedy, love. Thank you, Sonia. By introducing you to my audience, and then we'll kind of get into it. So guys, if you notice where you're writing, you'll see Andre. Andre is in the picture right here. And his YouTube channel is called This Moment. Okay? So let me know, guys, if you see Andre in the chat room there. He said, hello, everyone. So you guys seeing that on the right? I mean, I'm sure you see his name here. I'm pointing as though you guys are sharing my screen, but you're not. So yes, okay, great, good. So everyone can see Andre. So if you get a chance after hearing Andre speak, I know that you'll probably be impulse like hi B. Lachelle, how are you? I'm sure you'll be impulse to go and check out his channel. So I'm going to introduce you right now to Andre from the YouTube channel This Moment, and just a quick introduction, and then we'll kind of dialogue back and forth. Okay, Andre? Andre, say hello to everyone in the live chat.
Hello, everyone. Here I am.
Great. So, Andre, I'm very really visible on my channel on YouTube, but I do check into YouTube daily. And so every now and again, YouTube suggests channels to me. And maybe it was about a month ago, maybe a little longer, YouTube suggested your channel to me. And so I'm really glad that YouTube did, because when I started watching your videos, for one, Andre, I was extremely impressed that you were able to keep your videos under 5 minutes. So,
yeah, you have no idea how difficult that can be.
You do it like with ease. And what I find, Andre, is you're not rushing your voice. You're not rushing your pace. You're just at this nice pace, and you deliver your message under 10 minutes. 10 minutes to me is a skill. And so that really caught my eye. So I was like, okay, you know what? I have time to listen to this. It's only 5 minutes. And I'm glad that I did, because every time I subscribe to you right away, and every time that YouTube tells me that you uploaded a new video, which is daily, it seems that you upload, I'm so excited. I'm like, okay, let me see what he's talking about now. Yeah. So I'm glad that I found that YouTube suggested it. So tell me about yourself, Andre. Kennedy Love is one of my students of astrology. She's really good. I mean, she naturally is picking up on astrology in such a fast-paced way that you can actually tell that her nativity has kind of guided her to astrology at this time in her life. And so she would definitely appreciate conversations with Andre, because your insight is very, very insightful for me. And being that I taught her, for her to know that someone else inspires me astrologically is a big deal. Can you tell me something about yourself, Andre? Like, what brought you into astrology? And when did you start? Give me some details.
Well, I wasn't born into a family where there were mystics or any astrology whatsoever. Rather, what happened to me when I was around age 21, I decided to learn to meditate because of a book I read and following a sense that it might help me in some way. And when I learned to meditate, which basically meant sitting still and trying to still my mind and experience some inner peace, I started to notice as the weeks and months were passing that there was this sense in me, particularly within that peaceful state, that I should be looking into the planets, but I had no idea why. It just was coming through as a message, almost like a channeled message. And so about 6 months later, I thought about it some more, and pretty soon I went to an occult bookstore. I bought the books. I learned how to draw charts, because when I started doing this, there were no computers. So I had to use my grade 10, grade 11 math to do some ratios and create my charts. And pretty quickly, within a matter of weeks, I could see some pretty interesting things. For example, looking back, which tends to be a really good experiment because I wasn't doing astrology years before. So when I looked back and correlated a couple of things that had happened, I thought, wow, this is pretty coincidentally amazing. It shouldn't be so accurate. And that encouraged me to keep looking, keep studying. And so pretty much since then, it's been a part of my life, daily, hourly, to the minute sometimes. I'll be watching and measuring, because it correlates really well again and again and again. And I think it informs a person all the way from, world events. You consider a person like Trump and you wonder what the heck is happening here, and you study that. Or you see an event happen somewhere and you try to make sense of it, but all the way into literally your soul, your actual, your existential position in life is mirrored back by the planets. And so it's, to me, it's the most complete language. I mean, I've tried to consider so many languages, psychological, psycho-spiritual, but it's hard to find a language that is so all-inclusive as astrology is. Not that I don't use those other languages, but astrology, I would say, is my top language for sure.
Wow. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I came to a point in my life where I didn't need a doctor of the mind. My mind is intact, but I felt like, wow, you know what? I really want to explore the doctors that deal with the mind, like psychiatrists and psychotherapy. So I actually looked into a psychotherapist, which my insurance covered, and I started to see her, and she's like, you should be my therapist. But I'm saying that to say the reason that she felt that way was because I was approaching the conversations that she and I were having through an astrological lens. I was looking at the world through the archetypal patterns and conversations of the sky. And so because of that, I feel that doctors that deal with the mind, if they had an understanding of astrology and the conversation of the planets, they'd see the world for the mechanics that it's made out of, and it would help them to be a lot more efficient in how they handle every patient and the world conditions. So by you saying that, I really, really appreciate that. So you were able to take the clock apart, let's say, and put it back together again because you understood each piece of that clock, yeah?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? It was a little bit, I was able to.
Yeah, you were able to, let's say we have a clock and we're like, how does this clock work? So we start taking the clock apart and we start naming every piece that makes the clock work. That's what the planets do.
Yes, yeah. Yes, I think the part of astrology that sometimes isn't talked about as much as it should is that it really speaks to you in a really organic way. And the more you study it, the more you realize, well, I'll say the more I realize in any case, because I'm talking about my inner world. So I'll realize that how I'm feeling is being mirrored back instantly. So for instance, the lunar movement, which is pretty rapid and goes around the Zodiac in 29 days, and you get to experience all the different emotions. And that's an internal map that is invaluable because now I know where all my tricky spots are, my strong spots. Like, for example, almost anyone, if you give them a list of the moon aspects, whenever the moon is trine or sextile their sun, nearly always things are going fine. It's almost like magically those hours, all of a sudden all your cells are in alignment and things are going okay. The same is not going to be true if it's square. As soon as you know those spots, somehow things go off the rails, emotions, maybe an event happens. Maybe you just manage to just work yourself into that disharmony at that point. Once you start to realize that, you realize, well, yeah, I mean, the planets may be out there, but really they're in here. They're in me. They're happening, immediately. Now that's obviously different than talking about what's going to happen to Donald Trump next month. It's a totally different story. But to me, it's the root of astrology, and it's really the only way that will encourage you to go deep with it, because it's not going to speak to you as deeply. Even if you see some amazing coincidence around a famous figure, it still seems pretty distant until you correlate it to to your own body and mind. Let's say that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think most of us living on the planet today, we're looking at events that are happening, and they're not just random. These events are triggers. They're setting things off, and we know that these are bigger triggers or bigger events in our lives than normal. 15 years ago, life was normal for us, right? And so we're living at this period where everything is exaggerated, everything is up. So because of that, everyone is on the same page that something is going on here. So when you study astrology enables you to decode the language, and it helps you to understand that things are not just random, but everything works together in this kind of machine, if you will, for lack of a better way of explaining it. So Andre, you mentioned, which I really appreciate, because Sonia, when I studied astrology, I learned how to calculate the numbers, but not well, because the computer came out right after that. So the computer essentially does the work for an astrologer today as far as knowing the different placements of someone's nativity. When we put someone's information, astrological information from the time they were born, the time and the place, once we put that into the computer systems today, we automatically get a readout telling us about this person and what their birth blueprint is. When Andre was learning astrology, he had to do that himself. And so can you tell me, Andre, what is the difference between a modern astrologer like myself and someone who learned how to put the pencil to paper and add the numbers and do the latitude and the longitude lines? What is the difference that you think we could use as modern day astrologers that you had when you first learned astrology?
The last part of what you said didn't come through.
Okay.
For some reason.
What do you think?
But
go ahead.
I'll answer based on everything I heard you say. So I don't know that there necessarily has to be a difference. I know that when I learned, because there were no computers, I did a lot of drawing. So I would create charts by hand, draw the planets, and this is a form of learning. You know, you're engaged in the kinesthetic sense because you've got the visual and the kinesthetic, and so more than one sense is working. And there's a question of repetition and memorizing, and that probably helped to a certain extent. Then I would notice that as the first programs came out, I saw a lot of comedy because you would put a cassette in or something, and it would spin around, and 2 minutes later you would get a very basic printout. And then I started to notice that sometimes it didn't do it right because I would see the output and I would think, that can't be right. It's showing the sun is setting when it should be rising, or something like that. So I began to understand you have to know a little bit about what you're seeing. If the sun is rising, it should be shown rising, or like in the 12th or the 1st or something, versus if it's on the other side. And so I suppose the fact that I had done some manual work helped me quite a bit. But I can also see a person coming into it whenever, in the year 2000, when there were lots of computers or whenever, and doing just as well or better, provided they had the interest, because computers shorten the amount of time tremendously. Mm-hmm. And to give you an example, I remember that I thought I had invented something. I created this grid with all this detail back in the day that gave me all the positions of the planets in the chart, including absolutely everything that could happen to them in every sign. So I could draw it on a grid and see every single degree where there was some action. Well, my program now, you press a button and it just puts it out instantaneously. So the only difference is that I would encourage someone to say, well, look, they're there, now study them. The fact that the computer gives you the information doesn't mean just take a glance and then run away. It's really good to study things in depth, because there's no substitute for just looking at charts, looking at numbers. I notice now that, for example, I'll look at any chart and every degree speaks to me because I'm so immersed in the science or the art that, say, for example, if I see 23 degrees Gemini, my mind immediately says, well, that's what Trump's sun is. Mm-hmm. And then where is that in this person? What does that mean? Or perhaps a completely different degree that I've come across through seeing many charts. There's no substitute for that, but really that's about loving the science. There's nothing more than great interest. People have asked me sometimes, well, how do you learn this? I never thought of it as homework. If when I was doing homework in high school, that's like, I'll get it over with, just quickly finish, go on to something else. For me, 3 hours of astrology is like play. Yeah. And that's a lot of, that's really helpful toward learning.
That's a nice way to put it. I feel like astrology calls you. And if it doesn't, then you won't have fun while you're learning it. So, there's not too many books to read if you are called to astrology. That's part of your playtime, is reading the books on astrology. It takes a lot of work. A lot of people today, they learn from YouTube videos and things like that, but nothing can replace the self-study and the dedication that it comes to the enjoyment of learning astrology. So to me, that kind of sets a line between being called to astrology and just trying to learn it as an academic. To me, astrology is an art. It's a flow. It feeds the soul because it helps your soul to be able to heal through translation of the world and what we see. So Andre, can you pinpoint us on what kind of things are happening within the cosmos astrologically that are affecting us today? Why are we in a pandemic? Why are, from an astrological perspective, why are we experiencing this turmoil in politics, this polarity between black and white, and Republican and Democrat, and male and female, just all of the different polarities? What is happening right now in the sky that you can help my audience to comprehend what is going on?
Well, I would say that the answer to that is it has to be in several parts. You start to see patterns that have repeated from the past. For example, a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, a Saturn-Pluto anything is notorious for periods of great change. So, for example, you go back to the Saturn-Pluto opposition, that was 9/11, and the world was just crazy. It wasn't just what happened here. The Palestinians were suiciding themselves. India and Pakistan were nearly throwing nuclear bombs at each other. It was a very tense time. So that's the opposition. Now we have a conjunction. The previous conjunction was in around the late 70s, early 80s, which was also a major shift in world consciousness. And notice that it brought in the Reagan Revolution, which now is coming under heavy review by just the way things are happening. That whole paradigm of trickle-down economics is suddenly looking like maybe it's at its end, right? The entire Saturn-Pluto cycle, it's about 40 years to return to the conjunction. So that's one thing. But then I think the planet here that is really creating tremendous pressure is this trans-Neptunian Eris that was discovered in 2005, after which, or at the time, Pluto was demoted, if you recall, because they thought, well, if there's another planet, and now they found other planets still, and there are just too many planets. So the solution is, let's just kick Pluto out. Of course, astrologically, you can't kick it out. It's going to be there no matter what. And Eris becomes a really critical planet in the firmament, because you notice that right at 2020 is when it makes the square to Pluto, 2020 and 2021. So it was moving, very slow. But Eris is in a section of Aries. By the way, I call it Eris because other astrologers sometimes call it Eris, but then you have to say Eris and Aries, and it just sounds too much the same. So I call it Eris to emphasize it. So 2020, the square tightens completely. And in fact, it's spooky how the tightest moment was in July, when it was just crazy with all that, all those demonstrations and Trump going on the street with his Bible. I mean, that whole insanity. But all of 2020 and 2021, those two are square. And what they are is, Pluto is the uber male, the plutocracy. It's, when you think of Pluto, the myth of Pluto is a male that abducts a female. There's no better example of overpowering, someone that is weaker, let's say, or perceived to be overpower that. So then all fascists, all authoritarians, all extremists of this kind are Plutonian, and they tend to be male. The problem is, Eris is a female. She's a female goddess, and she's very angry because she's been left off the table, and she's in direct square to Pluto, and so she's fighting back. And so you get a period of great instability where two forces that are very strong are fighting with each other, and until they get through, you're likely to see a lot of turmoil, right? But however, you can also add that you mentioned earlier the good side. The good side is that Eris in Aries is stronger than Pluto in Capricorn, because Eris likes Aries. Eris is the sister of Mars. So it's a warrioress. And the idea is the warrioress that will take power back from men. And you can already see what's happening. What Trump is going to do inadvertently, unwittingly, he's going to advance women to a level of power they've never had before. And, you could already see it in 2016 when the Me Too movement began. So it was coming in. But now it's really locked in. We've got a potential vice president woman, probably a president not too long from now. And you should see it worldwide, because this thing is not just the US. This is a worldwide event. And having said that, I think 2020 is the worst of it, because in 2020 you have Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, all squaring Uranus. That's a lot of energy. By 2021, it's only Pluto. I mean, only Pluto is still pretty bad, pretty difficult. But I think 2021 should be easier than 2020. This is by far the worst moment, of that entire cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also took note that Black Moon Lilith is also in the sign of Aries, and she's angry also. Plus, we have Uranus in the Earth sign of Taurus. So the Earth is screaming. It's like we are at a time where the polarity of masculine and feminine dynamics, guys who are on the feed, are at not necessarily at war, but it's trying to figure out how it is going to move ahead in a paradigm that allows equilibrium. Because if we do not learn to balance the polarities, masculine, feminine, all the different opposites of things, then we will never be able to heal as a human family. And we do know, right, Andre, as astrologers, that 2020 through 2024 will be very tough times for all of humanity to have to face. And it's good that you feel that 2020 is the worst of it. I kind of feel like 2020 it just hit us with everything it's got. The next years that are following it, we will still be dealing with those things, but at least we're done with the blow.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you think of the U.S. has Mercury at 25 degrees Cancer, so Pluto, Saturn, and Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter opposing, and Uranus is squaring from Aries. So you've got a lot of energy there, and when that happens, Mercury you connected to the 7th and the 10th, so that's the government under great pressure, and the 7th I often connected in a national chart to just the dialogue, the way people are relating. So that's really topsy-turvy. And it's not the only thing. Neptune is in there too. It's really a besieged chart right now. Yeah. But I think when Saturn and Jupiter move, because by the way, that's another thing. Saturn and Jupiter are conjoining in December. And that's usually another important moment in setting a new direction. Although those cycles are shorter, Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, December 21st or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's also very important. Right. But in the meantime, the entire planet is experiencing the Uranus square regardless to those planets, and for the US especially, and it's hard to get out of it during 2020 because we're going to have a Saturn station in late September, still in those degrees, then Jupiter and Pluto follow. It's not easy. It's a period of great turmoil, and of course, to say to people, look, the most important thing is try to remain calm. And they'll say, well, yeah, sure, but tell me how that's possible since everything is so crazy. Right. But that might be the secret,
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. We are living in a generation where we are experiencing everything. It almost feels like every generation that experienced something. 1919 was the Spanish influenza. Then we had World War I and World War II. It seems like everything that happened to those generations are with us at this moment, culminated with the type of leadership that we have as well. So it's like there's no way to feel safe anymore. So we just had the true north node in the sign of Cancer, and I feel like we were trying to learn what home is. And at the end of that, Andre, we were all in quarantine in our homes learning what home is. So it's just amazing how the planets have this conversation that's happening. So everyone, I hope that you're enjoying Andre. What he's doing is explaining how the cosmos is, how the planets are having their conversations right now. When I teach astrology, I usually say to people, imagine that you're in a boardroom and there are a number of people, let's just say 7 people at one table. Some of those people are going to lead the conversation at the table. Some of those people are going to follow the conversation at the table. Some people are going to take notes, let's say a Virgo, right? But you're going to have also the energies that are joining in the conference at the table that are battling one another. So in the sky, when astrologers speak of turmoil happening, we're speaking that way because there are certain planets that don't like each other. You know, I'm putting this in a human way. There's certain energies in the sky that do not like one another. They're not compatible. So sometimes they are at war, I like to say. You know, in the Bible, in the book of Revelation 12:9, it says that there was war in heaven, right? And so in an astrological term, when the planets are at war, that war in heaven, the book of Revelation says it was kicked down to the earth. So what is above comes down to below. And as human beings, whatever that conversation is that was kicked down to below is how we will act it out on earth. And so just by saying that and what Andre is speaking about gives us a little insight into the actual relationship that is happening with the people that are sitting around at a boardroom table having a conversation. How many of them are arguing? How many of them are fighting? How many of them are in cahoots with one another, working together? And so just like us human beings, imagine, guys, even though many of you are not astrologers, imagine that just like the relationships of the human beings are on the earth, that's how the planets have relationships as well. And so an astrologer understands the personality types of the planets, and we are able to translate that personality type into what is happening in each zone of the human family. And that is the 12 signs of the Zodiac. So that is what Andre is explaining. So Andre, we also have Uranus going retrograde happening also August 15th. So I feel like that in the sign of Taurus is going to revisit some of the things that we've had to deal with on the planet. Maybe, you know, some things dealing with planetary changes and things like that. We might be revisiting that same conversation as well. So in the midst of the pandemic, we'll also be looking at things like that as well. And also with it aspecting Mercury aspecting Neptune, they'll be in conjunction. So Mercury and Neptune will have this conversation in the sky that will be really, really abrasive together as well. So people are going to speak their positions and it may cause arguments. It may cause more confrontation. Do you think, Andre, that with everyone arguing back and forth at this time on the planet, do you see it as a bad thing? Because I see it as a good thing.
That's a great question. Do I see it as a bad thing? Well, I mean, it's hard not to be a little discouraged at times about how toxic the argument has become in the U.S. It's difficult here because of the polarity, the tremendous rift. That's the bad thing, because who enjoys that? Nobody enjoys that. But the good thing is that you know this from personal transformation as well. Typically, it's when it feels most turbulent that the greatest gains are made, the greatest forward movement, the greatest self-knowledge. You could say that maybe one of life's greatest laws is learning how to reframe. Always look at a situation and say, okay, well, this looks bad, this looks harsh. What could it mean? What might it mean? And if you allow yourself to be receptive to new points of view, new ways of doing things, then it's not so bad. And when you look at the political situation, for example, you can already see, you know, if you're a little bit optimistic, you could see how, because of what has happened, it's more likely we'll get meaningful change than if it had not happened this way, because this kind of behavior we're seeing tends to raise alarms. And then when the alarms are raised, the public responds, you know?
Yeah.
So when the public responds, things happen. It's almost like the law of life, and so in that sense, I would consider it positive. But you see, this is the problem with astrology. The whole time is you're thinking, well, in order to grow, I need to have difficult transits, but I don't know that I enjoy them so much. So there's that push and pull of saying, well, I prefer it when the transits are nice, because then I can just, smell the flowers and feel happy. But I know that I need the tricky ones to grow, and then when they come, you're thinking, gee, this is good, but it's pretty hard. So you're constantly trying to learn how to, I guess, become more of a soldier, become more of a, develop that quality in yourself that allows you to take advantage of the period. Absolutely. And you said it earlier, people are home. The best way to approach it, in my opinion, is to accept. Acceptance is probably the one of the most divine keywords I would mention to anyone. If you know how to accept and work from there, then you'll be divinely guided. You'll know what to do. It'll just come to you because you're not resisting what is happening. You're actually saying, this is okay. All right, it's difficult, but I'll take it. And, then maybe you're spending more time at home, but this could mean maybe you're praying more, you're meditating more, you're studying something you didn't know before. There are a lot of positive things that can happen. I noticed, for example, even with all the meditation I've done, when the pandemic started, because I was forced to be home more, I noticed I could feel it, a level of restlessness that went way down, because the option to go out and do things that I didn't need to do suddenly had evaporated. Wow. So I felt this grounding, and that would be a positive, So I would say, in summary, the most important thing is to begin with acceptance and then work from there when the period is difficult.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for that. That is so true. I find that when I learn to surrender, that is when it's easier for me to cope with changes that are just really drastic. Sometimes when we resist, we make things worse. What I find too, Andre, what is so wonderful to me is that I find that, okay, I'm an Aries sun, right? And I mentioned to you before how when I was younger, I was very Aries. I had fights every day at school. I was always protecting my sisters. If anyone tried to hurt my sisters, I would fight for them. And I wasn't afraid to fight. When I reached 13, I became more passive. I began to show my Libra side of myself, my Libra moon. I was too passive, where I let people step all over me. So I was on both extremes. But when I got older, I learned, especially now as I'm older, to meet myself in the middle to create that balance. The reason that I'm saying that is that I find that at this time, the arguments and the polarities and the back and forth that people are going through in their nativities, there are triggers that are happening to bring out these points of ourselves. Like, right now, when I see certain things that politicians do that are wrong and hurt people, the Aries in me comes out. So it's like the planets or the energy, the conversation is, no, you must activate that part of yourself. And so this is why you are triggered so easily to get involved in the conversation of arguing over politics. So some of us may wonder why we don't have a horse in the race. Why are we so agitated with politics? Why do we now all of a sudden have a position? And the reason is because the planets will not allow any of us to be passive at this time. We have these, within our own nativity, in our birth chart, certain things must be activated in order for us to grow and to learn more about ourselves. And so if you find yourself reacting at this time, if you find yourself speaking more, saying more, don't condemn yourself, because we are all on this earth as a human family at this time, because there is a certain level of growth for all of us to have. And if we are not participating on some form, then we are not growing or activating those consciousnesses within ourselves that have been dormant for a long time. So, Andre, someone said, Milan Jenigan says, Andre and Vera, is there a scapegoat planet? Wow, sorry if this seems like a dumb question. No question is dumb, okay? You're thinking. So, Andre, did you hear the question?
Is there a scapegoat planet? Is that the question?
Yes, yes.
So, what do you mean by scapegoat? So, a planet that will, for example, harm somebody for no reason, or what angle on scapegoating are you getting at?
I'm wondering if, so Milan, if you can elaborate on your question, that would be really great. I'm wondering if Milan is meaning, is there a planet that takes the blame for everything that's happening on the Earth? Or maybe they're asking, is there a planet that we can all go to get off of this one? So I don't know. So let me know, Milan, what if you can get more specific, then we'll try to answer your question, okay? Daryl says that Sagittarian sun competes with me. Oh, okay, so you find Daryl finds that Sagittarian sun people, they make him want to engage in politics. Like he feels triggered by them to engage in politics. I hope that's what you meant, Daryl, if I'm interpreting your statement correctly. So what do you think about that, Andre? Daryl says that Sagittarian energy triggers him to argue about politics or to engage in politics.
Well, that would depend on the chart. So certain charts with Sagittarius will lean that way, and other charts may not. I mean, Sagittarius is definitely a philosophical, learning-oriented, big picture type of sign, and they're often evangelical. They want to put out their knowledge and influence other people. And just the fact that you're tuning into the legalities in the country, which is Sagittarius, the big picture, any kind of big picture situation, all of that could incline you toward politics. But there are lots of Sagittarians that have little interest in politics. Maybe for them it's religion or some other thing. You know, I can guarantee you, if you did an experiment and studied all the Sagittarians, even in the U.S., never mind the whole planet, you're going to get a lot of variety. Not all of them are, interested in politics. I mean, in terms of presidents, I think that, no, actually, Reagan was an Aquarius. He was Sagittarius rising, I think.
Oh.
I don't even know if I can remember a Sagittarius president, thinking back. But yeah, in any case, it's not the purest sign. The most political sign is probably Capricorn, because it's the sign of government.
Right.
But yeah, Sagittarius could easily, get you. Because one of the things too, you could say with Sagittarius, the whole idea of dialogue and argument is often present.
Wow.
So that's part of it. Just that
Definitely.
The person is bringing it into politics.
Definitely. Yeah, because Sagittarians, they remember their planet Jupiter expands. So they're here to expand and to grow. And so because of that, when they do, they learn things, and then they can definitely argue their points. So some people say it's a little too much, right? So Andre, could you do us a favor and maybe go through the 12 signs of the Zodiac, and just a little play game here. Tell us how each sign would probably be reacting at this time to everything that's happening. In general, yeah.
The way to answer that is to group them so that I can relate to the major aspects. So the conjunction in the sky, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, square Eris, that puts pressure on all the cardinal signs. So Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn are being challenged by that conjunction, or because that conjunction will either be in the same degrees for a Capricorn or square for Libra and Cancer, and then opposed. Opposed from Cancer and square from Libra and Aries.
Right.
But within that, you also know that if you're born around mid-January, mid-October, mid, I believe, July, and whichever the fourth one is in the spring. So I think it's mid April. So then what happens is they're really close because the degrees are really tight, and so they affect you even more. And so all those people the potential for growth is dramatically increased, but the potential for suffering is also increased, or the potential for something, extra challenging happening. Like, for example, maybe a person like that in those signs, particularly when it's closer, maybe they lose their job and they have no prospects for finding a job and they have no money. I mean, in other words, the challenge is greater. And then in other cases, it's not so much. But either way, if there's acceptance and there is an attitude of, let's just take this and work with it, then growth is guaranteed for sure, right? Then when you switch to, so those are the cardinals, by the way. That was Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Now, if you switch to Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, well, there you have Uranus roaming around and making an exact square at the moment. For people that are about 9 days into the sign, 9-10 days, they feel the Uranus in a really big way. And they'll feel it more broadly in a general way to the whole sign. But in particular, the early, or about a third of the way, they feel it more. And that Uranus, being the independent, go your own way type of energy, is great for developing that. So if someone is developing a new business, for example, in response to this pandemic, it's wonderful for that. But that's the good side of Uranus. The difficult side of Uranus is that it's very electrifying, and a person could become really, really anxious and really disturbed because of the problems they're experiencing. And that kind of energy is, I refer to it as sleepless energy. It's very wired, very lively, but prone to bouts of anxiety. In contrast to, for example, take now the mutable signs. You've got Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius. There you've got the Neptune connection, but the most affected are late in the sign. When you get into about the last 10 days, the Neptune is either conjoining or square or opposed. Neptune is a completely different energy than Uranus. There you get a lot of idealism and an almost a need for peace, and it descends into sleepiness almost, and withdrawing and spacing out and tuning out completely. Neptune is great for that kind of thing. On the high end, meditation and prayer. On the low end, intoxicants, drugs. And in between, maybe you start watching a lot of movies and reading a lot of books to escape the reality you're in. Now when I gave that interpretation, I'm focusing on the big planets and where they are. And then you can add, for example, Mars right now, as you said earlier when we were talking, Mars is near your sun. That's pretty unmistakable as well. So it turns out that this year, Mars entered Aries a while back, and it's in Aries a long time because it retrogrades. So it's not going to get out into Taurus until January. And so there's a big blast of Mars in Aries, and that really empowers Aries because it's in your own sign, and it gives you that energy, that strength to do things. Of course, it could also make you really angry at times, and it could really overemphasize your ego. That's the one thing to look out for with Mars. You can feel your head sometimes getting hot and you start to boil over. You need to be conscious so that you don't bite somebody's head off. So now that's Aries, but obviously it'll also affect Libra on the other end to an opposition. It'll affect Capricorn and Cancer through the square. So Mars there emphasizes all the energy that's already in Capricorn because it forms part of that square, so you've got Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, Eris, and Mars, lots and lots of energy triggering that. And let me think, is there any other planet I would add? No, I think that's pretty good. That covers pretty well all the planets from Mars.
Now, how do you feel Saturn is? So 1 second. Milan says there's a scapegoat in every family that are usually easy to blame for convenience of other family members and blame for everything. Scapegoats are usually black sheep. So, okay, so Milan kind of clarified. And I was just going to ask you also about Saturn, so that's interesting. So Milan is wondering if there's a planet that receives all the blame for everything.
Okay, well, I would say the answer to that one is if I had to pick one, it would probably be Saturn. Would be the most likely to put a person in that position. And the reason I would say that is that you could argue that any other planet can do it to some extent, but Saturn is the most likely, because what happens to a person that is scapegoated is they have not developed their Saturn enough to be able to stand up for themselves. They don't have the level of self-confidence, clarity, to express an energy that protects them from scapegoating. And so then what happens is the environment, in this case via their family, senses their fear and their lack of confidence, and they bounce. If that person has the requisite level of, I'm going to call it self-awareness, confidence, there are a whole bunch of keywords that point to, you could say, like an emergent spirit, an emergent quality that is automatically like a buffer, a protection, then it won't happen. But until that is the case, then it might. And by the way, a fascinating example of this is when you get twins, and you might know about this. I've come across twins charts where they'll have a Saturn square at birth, and one of the twins, for whatever reason, at an early age, adopts the hardworking, I'm just going to work and move forward in my life attitude that Saturn can bring, while the other twin, for whatever reason, falls into the fear that Saturn can also connect you to.
Wow.
And their lives, therefore, diverge, and you literally see the misfortune that afflicts the person that is caught by the fear. And, you know, I don't know what I would say to that person on the fear side, other than to say, well, you could say, well, be more like your sister. Well, that's not really fair. They'll get mad at you if you say that. So then you have to find a way to say, you got to get this Saturn to work for you, because if you let it drift into the fearful side, things are not going to work out well. And then you'll get anything from being scapegoated to literally injuries, trouble. It's just a troublesome thing. It's almost as though, you know, you've heard this book a few years ago, The Secret. You know, there was this idea, what you think about is what you attract. It's literally transmitting through the planets, and Saturn can be the most dangerous, because Saturn is you could say, is your, all at once, is your strength and your weakness. And so whichever way that tilts will mean your life will more or less unfold in that way. And so there are cases where you can see Pluto and Neptune and Uranus, and in special cases where they add to it. But almost always, if someone's Saturn is well developed, then they can, you know, avoid being scapegoated. But of course, I do realize this is easier said than done, because someone will say, how am I going to know that when I'm 7 years old? I know, it's a problem, definitely.
Yeah, I love that you said well developed, because that is, to me, the beauty of the knowledge of astrology, is that when you are just floating through the world without consciousness that we are being activated by planetary movements, you know, the moon governs a woman's menstrual cycle. We know that. We say that the emergency rooms are full, but no one with a powerful voice wants to acknowledge the fact that the other planets affect us as well. So when we don't have that astrological understanding, we navigate through life not being in touch with what energies are conveying to us, giving the energies a name, and being able to create alchemy within our lives, where we develop those energies so that they work for us and no longer work against us. And so that is how I see your discussion of Saturn, is when we are more conscious of it, when we are able to touch that part in our nativity or our natal chart and understand the message that it is conveying to us, that is when we begin to create the atmosphere of causes and effects that are more beneficial to us. You know, so long as Saturn is tapping at the door and trying to teach us lessons, but we're not conscious of what those lessons are or what's being conveyed to us, then we are going to continue to get knocked by Saturn. And you can also see that happen to so many people, where they'll complain that life is just not good for me, and everybody else is around looking at them like, don't you see that you're in your own way? It's almost like Saturn does that. It's like, look, I'm trying to show you this, right? But you're ignoring it, and you just keep hitting your head, because you're not willing to look that it's you that's in your own way. You have the power to overcome and to grow, or you have the weakness to stay the same. And if you stay the same, I'm just going to keep bringing the energies. Every 7.5 years, you're going to feel something from me. And even before that, of course. But being in touch with the definitions of those energies helps us to empower ourselves and change our lives and make it better. It is not going to keep us exempt from things, right, Andre? But at least it can help us to be able to cope and improve our lives.
Yes. Well, Saturn, well, okay, let me backtrack. So, what I've noticed over the years is that as a result of blending astrological awareness, by which I mean knowing where things are all the time, I'll know where they are, so then I can gauge which planet is supposed to be doing what, and blending that with a concurrent stream that is just as strong, developing self-awareness, developing an ability to not just see the stars, but see into my own mind and body. What starts to happen is I can correlate what the planet rules and what it's asking me to do. I can actually feel it in my bones. It's an unmistakable feeling, and I know that I can follow it, and I know that it's going to be correct. Right. So, for example, over time, one of the things about astrology that sometimes people don't realize, it's almost like a poetic language. You start to realize that by meditating, contemplating what planets rule, you start to come to an understanding of what to do. Mm-hmm. So Saturn represents, first of all, it's the last planet we can see. So it's the limit. With your naked eye, you can see Saturn in the sky. You cannot see Uranus. Mm-hmm. For Uranus, you need a telescope. But Saturn, you see it. And so then you realize, oh, that's interesting that it's the last planet that I see, and it also rules my skin. It literally does. I mean, you'd be amazed at the number of people that get a Saturn square and complain they get skin rashes and, things to do with the skin because the planet rules the skin. Mm-hmm. Then you realize, okay, well, the skin is the limit. So it's telling me something about my limits and what my limits should be. And this is where, for example, you see parents applying Saturn to their children because parents have grown to realize that there are limits. The kids want to live without limits, and the parents realize, no, you have to apply these rules, which is also Saturn. Otherwise, your life will go off the rails. So there's a sense that Saturn is trying to apply order, rules, limits. The trick is to make them creative and find a way that they actually help you as opposed to restrict you. Because if you apply limits that hold you back, that wouldn't be useful. Right? But if they're good limits, then the Saturn starts to work for you instead of against you because you feel it as an inner strength. And this can be as simple as, for example, you mentioned earlier, you said, okay, well, I reached the age of 13 and I changed. If I heard you correctly, you said, I started to become more introspective. Is that a fair way to put it, roughly? Or you started to, you became more shy.
More
right?
passive.
I interpret that as what happened to you is, if you look it up in the ephemeris, Saturn went into Libra when you were 13, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Saturn goes into Libra, and it's challenging you to become something more. It's saying, okay, what you are is you've been doing this thing. Okay, now you got to do this other thing. Pay attention, learn new things. Mm-hmm. But that takes effort. You probably had to think, well, maybe I can't say that at recess to that kid because if I say that, then this other thing will happen. Many times with Saturn, it's the force of no, N-O. You teach yourself, for example, you talk a lot, talk less. You have a glass of wine at night. Maybe that's not working so well in the morning. So you say no to that. And then you realize, oh, it's okay. I don't need that glass of wine. I feel better now. Mm-hmm. And you keep building slowly with things that are doable that actually serve you well. there's no point in doing self-limiting that has no purpose. But if it has a purpose, it's really useful. So think of today's situation. The people that are feeling Saturn, if all they do is look at their life and say, okay, what can I take out? What can I just eliminate? A habit, right? That is not really helping me. Mm-hmm. They do that, immediately the Saturn gets energy, mm-hmm. and they start to grow, and it'll guide them to the next step. It is a step-by-step thing. It's unrealistic to say, okay, I got this solution, this formula, I just apply it once and everything is great. No, it doesn't work like that. It takes time. But you begin. You take a step, the next step guides you, right? This is where, for example, people will dramatically underestimate the effect of, let's say that they're smokers and they quit smoking. The effect of that goes far beyond your health. There's something that happens in your spirit that is nurtured by the fact that you've made a move towards strength, something that, by the way, with Saturn is the idea of short-term discomfort for the purpose of long-term comfort. Mm-hmm. That's the secret of Saturn. One time an astrologer said to me, when I was learning astrology, she looked at the chart and she said, look, see Jupiter crescent above the cross. Jupiter is first you get the goodies and then you pay. Mm-hmm. Saturn is first you pay and then you get the goodies. And that's a great way to understand how Saturn works. Mm-hmm. You know?
I love that. Yeah, I often describe him as a taskmaster, you know, and then when you're done with the task, everyone benefits, right? So that's awesome. I know you guys are enjoying Andre. His wisdom is amazing. Someone said, thank you both. I think it's amazing how Vera mentioned Saturn when that was what Andre said, right? Isn't that? See, yeah, Andre, Milan was saying how when we were talking about the scapegoat, I said Saturn came to my mind, and then you said Saturn. So it's like we're on the same frequency here. So that's the answer then, Milan, Saturn. Yeah, you always hear people say Saturn's beating me up, you know, but understanding it from the perspective that Andre just broke down so amazingly for us helps you to understand that there is a benefit that is being acquired by all of the events that are happening in order to discipline you to structure. So Leo Medina says, hi, Vera, I admire your knowledge from El Paso. Good to see you. Good to see you, Leo. Thank you so much for being here. We're Leo, first name, the sign of Leo. I always notice that when people have the name Leo, they're usually a Leo. So is that true, Leo? Let me know. Not always, but most of the time. So Andre, can you share with my audience some of the topics that you speak about on your channel? If you guys visit his channel, it's called Andre. If you can type in your channel in the chat portion of the screen, let everybody know your channel so that they can go and refer back to it and subscribe to it and gain some knowledge from the information that you give on your channel. That would be great. So if you could just write that there, that would be wonderful. I've never been to El Paso. Okay, great. I've never been to El Paso. I've always wanted to. You know what? When things are normal, I think I will. Love you too, Leo. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. So what is so wonderful about this conversation is that you guys are hearing the rhythm of astrology through Andre's perspective, which is very insightful. So I'm really glad that he's bringing this type of vantage point for you guys to see so that you can understand the benefits of understanding yourself. You know, we all go to college and we get degrees, but if we don't have a degree in ourselves, 360 degrees of knowledge, of course, we're not going to master all of our aspects and stuff within our charts. But if we have a bit of knowledge about what our nativity is speaking to us, what the planets are speaking during different points of our lives, then we can cope better. We can deal better. We can be more efficient in how our lives turn out. We can be participators rather than being subject to the energies of what the planets are communicating to us. So, Andre, can you give us a political perspective? Okay, so on your channel, you speak a lot about Donald Trump. Not knowing this man, if you just looked at his chart and you saw some things that were on this man's chart, what would pop out to you, and how would you describe that person not knowing anything about them at all?
That's a great question. Well, okay, so before I answer, I'll say this. It turns out that it is extremely helpful to know the person. And so when you're doing, or I'm going to say when I'm doing really in-depth astrology, the more I know about you, the more I'm going to be able to help you. It's really that simple, because once I know you and once I know how the planets are working for you, it's pretty easy to figure out what's going to happen next, or at least, it's pretty easy to give you advice and say, well, look, this is what I would do based on this. Mm-hmm. In Trump's case, he's not going to take my advice. He's not going to take anybody's advice. He's just someone I'm watching. There is a tremendous amount of information about his past, things that have happened and when. And I get to see him on TV every day if I want. I can look into his eyes, and I can get into his spirit almost and figure out, what's this guy doing? What is he thinking? Why is he doing this? And so then my insight into the chart is dramatically improved, because I can see the planet speaking to me. I can see him, for example, he's an extreme example of a corrupt Neptune. Neptune, if you take it and put it at the extreme end of the dial, is a total liar, a person who lives in the wrong world. They cannot speak the truth. For them, everything is a lie. Everybody lies. I just lie better. I'm an expert liar. I don't even know what it's like to tell the truth. Everything is lies. Mm-hmm. You turn the dial to the complete other end and you get a spiritual master, which to some people would go, that's crazy. How can those two be in the same dial? They are. That's just the way it is. Just like Saturn at the top end is also a very masterful, very, very strong person. At the other extreme end is someone that can be so depressed, they're totally paralyzed, because it's a reducing archetype. So the reducing archetype, you either work it, work is reducing. You reduce your time to what you do, or you become really depressed. It's your choice. And Neptune the same way, right, as an example. So, but when you say, if I didn't know, now say you throw this chart at me and you say, here it is, I'm not going to tell you what this is. And here's the thing, even without knowing, I would look at that and say, well, I don't know anything about this person, but this is not a good time, because there are so many problems in 2020 for this guy. In fact, if I didn't know Donald Trump and someone gave me that chart in 2016, in summer of 2016, and they said, there's a big job coming up that I might get. Do you think I can get it? I would have said, yes, but don't take it. It's a really bad idea, because I would look at 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and I would say, I would not take this job. If you take this job, you're going to be sorry, because there is just too much energy that is working against you. Now, again, if the person was a priest, I don't know, someone very developed, then I would say, well, you can take the job, but it is going to be difficult, and some difficult things will happen. Perhaps you'll be able to make it work. If it's Donald Trump, I would have said absolutely not, because of what's happened. And so life in that sense has proved me right. And essentially, with no knowledge at all, you do see multiple planets. He has, at the moment, 11 different orbits, starting from Mars. So it's Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Eris, and Haumea and Makemake. All the planets all the way out to 550-year orbits. All the planets that are about either the size of Pluto or half the size, they're all squaring or opposing. That's too much. It's too much energy. And so, to be honest, if you ask me, quite frankly, this is sometimes the chart of a person that you say, maybe you should get your affairs in order, because this is pretty dangerous. I mean, consider the health situation in his chart. So far, he's experiencing it as the health of the country, and it's not good for him. Even the death aspect in his chart. He's experiencing it through the pandemic in the country, and he's paying a terrible price. I get it, but he's also exposed. He's by no means safe from it. So I've said a lot, but I'll finish by saying, without knowing anything, I would say this is looking pretty rough, man. I don't know. I'd have to ask some questions,
right,
about what their life was like.
It's just amazing because, you know, again, we do not, when you learn astrology and you learn to interpret charts, you know things about people that you should not know, or you would not know had you not seen the energetic expression in their nativity. You know, you mentioned the Neptunian aspect of Trump and how that shows the tendency towards lying and cheating and corruption. And what's amazing is that every client that I've had that I've seen aspects like that to Neptune, I was always right. So it's like, and again, we have our good aspects of ourselves and our shadow aspects. And the idea is for us to learn how to use them properly so that we can create balance. And if everyone in the world were trying to improve on their nature, then the world would be a better place. But most of us are not improving on the different parts of ourselves in order to create harmony within ourselves, and what's inside comes outside and also into the world. So Donald Trump has, as you mentioned on your videos and stuff as well, he has this type of characteristic that he was born with. And, you know, I noticed doing his chart that he has a lot of aspects that deal with his mother and not feeling love from his mother, a very hard time with his mother, even with his father, that all through his life he felt like he had to cheat in order to be recognized. And so this is the nature that we see, because that type of behavior became a practice. And so do you notice things, like I notice things where a lot of things that he might have done in the past are going to come back to bite him as well? Have you noticed things like that in his chart?
Well, yes, things that come back to bite him, yes. Well, you can see that as a result of becoming president, you can see that all of his prior dealings, anything from his terrible relationship with women, his criminality around business, the things that he's doing in office, all of that is under a tremendous amount of pressure because it's becoming more and more public, which he doesn't want, but he's forced to accept. And so, yes, absolutely. I mean, you can say things like the 12th house is more karmic than the first house, but in a certain way, they're all karmic. You know, your chart is like a giant, it's a drawing of your karma constantly. So whenever you get any aspect, there is a strong link to what you've already done. It's inevitable because everything is causes and conditions. It's already happened, and to a great extent, you're here because of everything that's happened up to now. And this guy, I mean, he's just the poster child for, he's a gangster. He's a gangster. That's the only way you can put it. He's lived his life as a gangster. And so, to be honest, being president is not the best place to be a gangster. And I don't mean in the sense that he's harming us. I mean for him, because I genuinely believe he didn't want to win. I genuinely believe that his plan was to lose close and create a really big business because he likes to talk. He's not a doer. When he does things, he screws it all up. He goes bankrupt. He can't manage anything. But he's a great talker. He just talks, and says things. But now that he's forced to do the job, he's exposed massively. And you know, and by the way, it's probably obvious to people that one of the biggest reasons he is fighting for his life to win a second term, aside from hating to lose and aside from his pride, is that he's facing some pretty serious legal exposure. If he loses, he's got problems because, you see, you can go to court and lose on something where it can't be proved. But if there are papers, you're in a lot of trouble. For example, everyone knows that Al Capone, who was a murderer, was put in jail for tax evasion. They didn't catch him for murder. They knew that he was murdering people, but they couldn't prove that. So they used tax evasion. Trump almost certainly has done things that are going to put him in a great deal of trouble. And he knows that come November, if he doesn't win, he doesn't have, no one can pardon him. And I don't think he can pardon himself. That doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So he's in a tough situation, really tough. And by the way, you can look at his chart and say, what happens in 21? Doesn't get better. Neptune continues for years afterward.
Right. Right. It's like, even if something doesn't happen now, it will. So it's inevitable when things catch up with you, because when we're dealing with nativities and the patterns of the stars and the cosmos, we're dealing with timelines, because it's almost like the planets are marking time. And with every year, every generation, every decade has a theme that is involved in it, not only in the world in mundane aspects, but also in each of our lives. So we go through a period of our lives when we're a child, right? We start off the first year with, we're trying to learn who we are. So we're Aries. Aries is I am. So when I was about 1 year old, I started to kind of recognize I'm Vera. I didn't know my name, but I was conscious of who I was. As I moved on, I began to taste food in the Taurus energy. So that was the next time period that I moved into, where I was learning what it is that I liked, how to speak my voice in Gemini, how to start naming things. This is a cup. This is a phone. All of those things I started to communicate around 3 years old. When I was about 4 years old, you become aware of your surroundings, of home, of mommy hugging you, all of those things. So the planets are marking time. And with that time comes different parts and different themes and different events that are triggered within our lifetime. And so the same thing when we, people speak of karma, like as if karma has this consciousness that says, oh, right, Vera pushed that kid, I'm going to get her back. It's not a conscious, something that's going after you for what you've done. What it is it's time period. So if you have not evolved, or if you cheat on your taxes and the planets come into your 8th house of taxes and financial affairs, then those planets, if it's negative, it may trigger an audit. So the audit is, the results of the audit will be what you did with your taxes before you were caught or before you got audited. So this is how marking time happens within an astrological chart. So whether a politician is exposed now or later, as long as a person lives, there are generational planets that can come along and even trigger our lives personally. So, so that's kind of giving you guys some ideas of how the planets work. I know it's a bit complicated, but I know you guys get it. I know you get it. Someone asked when Saturn was in the sign of Virgo. I think that was like 2006 or 7, right, Andre? What do you think? Probably around 2006 or 2007, I would say. Saturn was in the sign of Virgo last.
Yeah, 2007,
Okay.
2007, 2008, and it left Virgo completely. It left it in near the end of 2009.
Okay.
It was around fall of 07 to about late fall of 09.
Great.
In that range.
Good. So thank you so much for that, Andre. See, that's even when you learn astrology, you begin to learn time periods and when planets are what they're expressing at different times and when they're expressing it. And so Saturn was in Virgo. So I imagine that is where your Saturn is, or you're expecting it, or something. Let me see. Who was that asked me that? I don't see it. Okay. So, so Andre, what do you do? Do you do chart readings? Do you teach astrology? What do you do on your platform?
What you mean, on the YouTube channel or overall?
Yes, and just in general, do you do readings and do you teach astrology?
Yeah, I teach it, and I do pure readings, and then I do life coaching using the chart. That's probably the most effective, because when I do a reading, I talk to the person an hour and a half and I present all kinds of ideas. But when I'm doing it in the context of coaching, it's in shorter periods. But the idea is to study the chart and focus on actions that can be taken to actualize the chart. And that can be really effective as the person is working week to week to, implement ideas that are there because they actually really work. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you do a reading, it's good, but then it depends on the person whether or not they'll apply what they heard. And, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. That's just a flip of a coin, depending on the individual.
Yeah, that's kind of, when I do charts, I try to give people remedies, because what good is helping people to understand what's going on if we can't try to help them find a way to benefit from the information we're giving them. So I'm glad that you do that. Life coaching, I think a lot of people, especially now, are going to need that. And within the next upcoming years as well. So what do you think past the year of like 2022, what do you see as the biggest theme that all of humanity, especially the United States, will be facing? I mean, we will be having our Pluto return as a country, which is huge. Let's ask that. How do you think that is going to affect America?
The Pluto return?
Yes.
Yeah, well, the Pluto return is big. There's no question. It's a big topic. And you can already see some of the topics because, so the Pluto return in its precise sense is a bit later. It doesn't really happen until 22. And by the way, there's a way to correct the chart a little bit because I don't know if you've heard of precession. What happens is after you're born, the sky is shifting backwards very slowly. So by the time you reach the age of 72, there's a degree gap. There's like a degree delay in some of the effects because the place where the planet was is actually a little bit later now. So you have to wait for things to happen. So in the case of the US, because it's 250 years old, there's a 3 degree gap. So then you can expect Pluto to be returning more than just 22. It's more like around 2025. So it's several years of a return. Mm-hmm. And if you think about when it was formed, the idea is that they're forming this independent nation from the British. The first thing you see in the chart is that it was likely turbulent, which it was. They had to fight for it. But one of the problems, they write this constitution and they say, all men are created equal, and yet they all own slaves. I mean, it's a completely, hypocritical, insane thing to be doing while you're proclaiming this other thing. So now you're seeing, for instance, in race relations, it's in the foreground. It's something we have to reckon with and come to some kind of reconciliation, which, typically is a good thing because just like with a person, you would grow. Now, nobody's going to get a Pluto return. Nobody lives to be 250 years old. But in the case of a country, there's a chance because it lives longer. And for sure, it's a new start, it's a new chapter. So you can almost anticipate that once we get into particularly the second half of this decade, things are probably going to be very different, because the U.S. is closing a really, really big chapter in its history. And a lot of things are likely to change, around race relations, around our ideas of authority. You can already see that now. A lot of the Donald Trump trouble is this guy is trying to be an authoritarian, and people don't like that. They're against authoritarianism because the U.S. is a more democratic country, right? Now, I'll tell you something, though. There is one cycle that I spotted that is not the Pluto transit, but it's happening at the same time. And it does give me some pause because it's the idea that when you look back, the U.S. was formed in 1776 with Neptune and Virgo in the 10th house. And if you think about it, in order for that to happen, people had to come together and make a decision. We're going to do this together. Let's go. So they actually start a war with the British and they say, we're leaving and we don't care what you think. And we will fight for our lives if we have to, but we're doing this. And that's it. That's the end of it. So then that happens, then the US is formed. Then we go to the Neptune opposition, which is about 80 plus years later. Neptune goes all the way to Pisces. It opposes itself. Those are the years just prior to the Civil War. And those were really rough years for the US. People were in incredibly intense disagreement about the whole slavery problem. And a war was fought, right? Where many people died. So you can imagine, if you think we're disagreeing now, imagine being here in the 1850s. That was Neptune and Virgo opposite itself.
Wow.
Fast forward, Neptune goes back to its original place right around the time when the U.S. joined the Second World War. And if you recall the Second World War, the U.S. came together and became the strongest power on earth. We were something like 18th in productivity, and we went to number one, making tanks, making airplanes. We joined the war, we won the war. Everyone was in on the action together again, because that Neptune position mirrors what was happening in 1776.
Wow.
But now we're back to where we were just before the Civil War.
Wow.
Hence, there's a lot of disagreement. So Neptune needs to get out of Pisces, literally, which is also going to happen in a few years. We still have a little bit more to go, but it explains why right now there's a lot of polarity, a lot of, disagreement, let's say, right? So bottom line, I would say to people, do the best you can and be patient. I think we're going to have a better government soon, but I don't think it's going to be easy for a while. I think we're still going to have, quite a few things to work through for several years. A lot of political thinkers believe that this Trump disease is not going to leave the Republican Party right away. Even though they may lose, they're not going to quit with this kind of thinking for a while. So, we have to remain patient. And, I have to tell you, it's difficult for me. I don't know how easy it is for you. For me, it's very difficult to imagine how you could be a Trump supporter. It's something that drives me crazy, because I think, how can you not understand something so basic? But there are millions of people in this country that believe that he's a good leader.
Right.
And all I can say is go figure.
Right.
Go figure, but that's where we are.
Yeah, I think what's happening is we are all, every single position is in the mix right now. I tend, as an astrologer, also one of the things that I noticed was that for Black Americans, you had mentioned slavery and how the country began with slavery over 250 years ago, and how the contradiction between all men are created equal, but having slaves was, how can those two possibilities work together? They just weren't. So the very foundation of America and its unification was called into question. And because of that, when I look at the chart, I notice that America has Chiron in Aries, which is the wound. And I also notice that every 50 years, which we are at the 50-year mark, Black Americans are agitated in some way, whether there's some big events happen surrounding the conversation of Black America. We experienced it in the late 60s when I was born. And so I also believe that Black Americans have their Chiron in Aries, and that is the agitation of America. And this is the reason that at this moment we are having the conversation of how our government should be run, in addition to how are we going to reconcile the beginning of America that enslaved people, and here are the descendants in America right now who are still disadvantaged in some way. How do we reconcile this? How do we fix this? And so the infighting, the arguing, the politics, and all of that is part of the healing crisis. When we fast, at first, you start to feel horrible when you're fasting, and there comes a point where you reach, let's say you've been fasting for 21 days. You reach a point where your body starts to feel like it's breaking down on you, like you're dying. And that's called the healing crisis, because in order to heal and to rise, you need to first break down. And this is what we're seeing as a manifestation of the intestines of America and the world, how so many of the contradictions that don't reconcile with one another are now coming up for conversation. It's causing tension, it's causing arguments, it's causing war, right? And so that is part of the healing process. So I'm hopeful that maybe, no matter what anyone's position is on this, that there can be some kind of benefit from it. And I don't know, I feel like I haven't looked ahead to 2030 to see what the planets are speaking, but a lot of people look forward to the Age of Aquarius. What are your thoughts on the Age of Aquarius? How do you describe that?
Well, okay, so the Age of Aquarius, I have to tell you, is if you go by the strict rule of what it means, it's the idea of the constellation of Aquarius. And if you use the actual measurement of when that happens, that doesn't happen for at least another 500 years. So we're talking about a very distant thing. So I've never understood why people talk about the Age of Aquarius as though we're in it or it happened last century, because that's not what it is. We need, when they say in Vedic astrology, what they're doing now is they're subtracting about 23, 24 degrees from your planets, and then you get this other chart that is with signs that are earlier than typically. Like in your case, I believe would you still be an Aries? I'm not even sure if that'd be the case.
They actually have me as a Pisces, and I can see the spiritual side of myself, but I am totally not a Pisces at all.
Exactly. No, yeah. Exactly.
So I agree. Yeah.
And it's a bit of a paradox, because I remember already many years ago concluding that the tropical signs, meaning like how you're Aries and not Pisces, were correct, because if you are paying attention to the moon and what sign it's in, you can hear in dinner table conversations, the public mood switches to the degree, to the sign that it's in, not the previous sign. It's really obvious. And now I'm noticing that there are modern Vedic astrologers. One that I can mention is a German guy. His name is Ernst Wilhelm. He's on the web for sure. You can find him. And he's really into astrology. I mean, this guy is a, crackerjack astrologer. And he says, he's a Vedic astrologer. And he says, if you use constellational signs, it's like flipping a coin. That's how accurate you'll be. But if you use tropical signs, you'll get a lot of accuracy. So he actually uses tropical signs mixed with Vedic, right? Which is highly unusual, but that's what he does. Right. And so when you say the Age of Aquarius, right now we are at minus 24. To get to minus 30, which would be the actual switch, where instead of Pisces would be, because in other words, the Age of Pisces started about 2,000 years ago, right? But it has another 600 more to go before it actually switches to Aquarius. Right. So I'm a little puzzled when people say we're in the Age of Aquarius. I think maybe they mean possibly, like, let's look at it. Uranus was discovered in 1790, right? So that brings in the Industrial Revolution. There's no question that technology is a huge factor in society in the last 200-300 years. Uranus has a connection to Aquarius. You could mean that. Technology has completely upended everything and changed human consciousness in a big way. But beyond that, what do you mean by the Age of Aquarius? That'd be my question to someone who asked me that question.
Yeah, I agree too. There are different views on when the Age of Aquarius, and even what it is. I tend to see the Age of Aquarius from a biblical perspective. As far as its application, because I see astrology or religious, in the work that I do, I see the Bible through the lens of astrology. And so when I hear of the Age of Aquarius, I relate that to the 1,000-year reign in the book of Revelation that's being spoken about. But that's for a whole nother topic. But I always like to hear another astrologer's perspective on the Age of Aquarius. I agree, we're not in that age right now. But if we were, how do you think conditions would be? Because, a lot of people think it's going to be all, roses and wonderful things and great, great things. But I see that there's a possibility that it could also be like an AI type of conditions that we could be living in, where computers take over. So if we were in the age of Aquarius, how do you think that would manifest, or the varying ways that it could manifest?
Well, you know, to me, it's a great question, because to me, it feels like a really open-ended question that is really difficult to answer. I mean, just think of it in our own lifetimes. Who would have predicted all kinds of things that have happened even in the last 20 years? Technology takes all kinds of detours and goes on tangents that are difficult to predict. And so to look really far ahead is really, really difficult. And in a way, you have to ask yourself, is that even useful? I mean, you're living now, so everybody has a period of life, and which is, you know, somewhere between whatever 60 and 100 years. So to me, it seems that the better way is to focus on what you can do to, in a way, you could say, give birth to that age of Aquarius in yourself. Like, find a way, assuming that you're saying this age of Aquarius could be a really liberating, a really freeing, some utopia, you know, some amazing thing that we don't have yet. Well, if you wait for the world to go there, you're probably going to wait a long time. And for all you know, it won't happen, right? But you also know that in any era, in any age, there are people that in a way are Aquarians. They've figured it out. They're illuminated. They figured out what to do. So you focus that way, and you try to give birth to it in yourself, and then you help as many people as you can to feel the same way or connect in the same way. But to expect to save everybody, or for everybody to become illuminated at the same time, it's possible, but I don't think it's a bet that I would place anytime soon. It's probably pretty far away. If not, perhaps maybe that's never possible. Maybe the world is always in some turmoil. I mean, you know, people complain about the current era, but I want to ask you this. If you had a time machine, I'll give you a time machine right now. It's a magical machine. You can go in and you can choose any era to go back to, right? You just push the button and it'll take you back. Is there an era you'd rather live in than other than today's era?
Wow. No.
And, you know, and most people would say, no, actually, I think I'll stay where I am.
No, I think these are wonderful times that we're living in, you know, and I agree. You know, you hear people talking about this is the time, you know, the song, the Age of Aquarius and things like that. To me, it's more of a concept, and it's more of understanding the possibilities of how humans can be to one another, how we can be a brotherhood, how that possibility always exists. But as long as we're not each working within ourselves to better ourselves, then that's not even attainable. And the human family hasn't even gotten to the point where astrology is mainstream, you know, where in school teachers are able to use it in order to have a student and know how that student can learn, how to reach a child, how to heal someone who's mentally ill or someone who's been through trauma through knowledge of the nativity and the events that happen within their life due to the planetary alignments in the sky. So we have a long way to go, if at all that would ever have been possible. So I agree with you. Great. So if anyone has questions, you can ask the questions. Andre, I don't want to keep you longer than you're able to. Can you please tell everyone how they can reach out to you, how they can find you? Also, again, type in your information in the feed there so everyone can visit your channel. His channel is called This Moment. And why is it called This Moment?
That's a great question that I'd love to answer. So, okay, so the reason I called it This Moment is because on the one hand, your chart is the chart of this moment when you were born, that moment. I mean, we can say that moment, but then it was this moment. It was the moment in time. And the moment in time is, in fact, what astrology is. And having an exact time is gold. It's such a powerful thing because you can do some amazing measurements that can only be done with an accurate time. And the moment is precise. So there's that. Then there is the question of time itself. And if you think about it, first of all, you ask yourself, well, what planet rules time? and perhaps someone can chime in and say no, but I'll reveal it. It's Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn is Chronos, it's the ruler of time. And so the idea is that somehow, if you think of our experience as humans, the human realm, what we are as human bodies, human spirits, human whatever we are, it seems to me to be an incarnation where we're learning about time. It's all about time because we are unique in that we know we have an expiration date. Animals are born, they don't think about it, they just do things and then they die. We know what's going on, we're conscious of a little more. So there's this constant attempt to relate to time in the wisest possible way, which in astrology would be Saturn. And then when you think of that, well, okay, what does this mean? And then I'm sure you've come across many, many teachings that say the secret to all spirituality, the secret to all development, the secret to all this stuff is be present, be in the moment, be here now. The famous be here now, which of course is easier said than done, but is in fact the best thing one can do. And that would be, in my mind, the apex. That would be complete mastery of Saturn, because Saturn is mastery of time. When you take it to the limit, a person who is completely connected to their Saturn understands time so completely, they are completely in the moment. They no longer deviate from that. And as a result, their life starts to unfold in the best possible way. And you don't need astrology for that, by the way. You can do that without any astrology. A person can simply learn to sit still and connect with their mind, and it'll come to them. It's just that then you realize, oh, that's Saturn. It's kind of cool. I can make that correlation as well. But nevertheless, it's the truth. And so for me, it blends or marries my interest in astrology and in the timing of things and a sense of what might be coming up so that I can adapt better by knowing the cycles, together with the philosophy of life practice, which is to bring everything into the present, which is a little paradoxical because I know someone could ask and say, well, how are you going to be in the present if you're worried about the future? Well, I don't think about the future per se. It's just there. I try to be in the present. I try to be in this moment, and then I'm aware of the cycles that are coming up. So it'd be like saying to someone, astrology is like knowing that because it's raining now, I need to carry an umbrella. If it's sunny, I need my sunglasses or I need some other thing. But then when I go outside, I can't be thinking about, I got to think about where I am. I'm walking. I'm paying attention to the moment in time. So you're always present, but you have this knowledge that enables you to also anticipate the future. And both of those link to this moment. So that's why I called it that.
I like that. That's awesome. Yeah, we have to be present. I think for me too, I had to learn that a lot in my life because I was always thinking about, oh, what's going to happen if this happens? What's going to happen if that happens? And some of those things never happened, so I missed so many moments in my life. And I think as we get older and we mature, we kind of learn to get into that rhythm of being present and understanding that. I remember my mother used to say to me, because when she would visit my house, I was always cleaning, like sterilizing everything. And she goes, one day you're going to see that you don't have to do all of that it's okay. And I was like, no, never, Mom. Everything has to be in its place. And now I'm there. Like, I'm always cleaning. Everything's neat, but it doesn't have to be done all day and take up my entire day doing it. So yeah, so I think as we age, we begin to get more in touch with Saturn and how Saturn is giving us more understanding of ourselves and how to enjoy our lives more as well. Some people say Saturn takes away the joy, but I actually think it can teach you about the joy of life and understanding how to live in the moment. So I love the title of your YouTube channel. So I know I kept you on a long time.
No, it's my pleasure. I look forward to doing it again sometime because when I heard you say that, there's a story I can tell. We'll talk about it next time. But if you scientists now know a lot about the solar system, much more than they used to. And I love watching Science Channel cosmic stuff because I actually find it relates to astrology, and I get some terrific ideas about how things are. And if you heard the model for how they think the solar system was created, in particular the role of Jupiter and Saturn, it's actually both incredibly insightful and even funny, because the way it turned out, they reflect their characteristics as astrological forces. And just to keep people in suspense, but for now, but Jupiter and Saturn, the two together, are responsible for life on Earth. Had they not done what they did back in the early days, there would be no life here. So think about that.
That's awesome. I know I want to hear that. Don't you guys want to hear that? Wow, you really, that's a tease, because that sounds really, really interesting. And you're not speaking from the mythological perspective, right? You're speaking from the actual creation.
Well, no, both.
Oh, both. Wow, that's awesome. Both. I can't wait to hear that. Well, thank you, Andre. Did you put your information there? Because I don't see it in the feed.
I did. I put the information. If you go into that link, you'll find it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I love watching your videos. And please keep them coming. And you can go over 5 and 10 minutes. I was just saying that's what caught my eye. Was that.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful night. Okay, Andre? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, yay. That was awesome, right, guys? Did you guys enjoy that? So I'm just going to type in Andre's channel again. I don't see it there. I know he said he put it in there, but I don't want you guys to miss his videos, because he seems to do them every day. That's what I noticed. So yeah, guys, I just wanted to come on, give you guys a video. I'm always gone because I'm always trying to rest up. So I hope everything's going well with everyone. I'm still here. I've gotten a lot of messages and emails, and sometimes I don't get to respond. I just wanted all of you to know that I'm aware, I'm cognizant of what you all wrote to me, and I'm going to write back as soon as I get around to it. I might be selling my house and moving somewhere else because I want to get more property. I hope you guys are thinking that way as well. I have a half an acre, but I want more. I want to be able to have animals for self-reliance and independence. So that's another thing that's keeping me busy. But I just want to come on and say hello. Hope everyone is doing really, really well. And you guys stay strong and take care, okay? I'm going to put my email. Some people have been asking for that as well again. So I'm going to put my email and degrees@gmail.com. So Vanessa, how are you? Good to see you. Milan, thank you so much for your great questions. Leo Medina, thank you so much. Paul Hesiva, I always say your name wrong. I never get that right. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. Be safe and be good at this crazy time. And yeah, so take care, everyone. Bye.